Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program, Glen Dawson, Mountaineer, and Bookman. We'll be getting started shortly as we're just letting folks in from the waiting room now. So please be patient and we'll be back in a minute. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program, Glen Dawson, Mountaineer, and Bookman. We'll be getting started shortly. Folks are just entering the webinar from the waiting room, so please be patient, and we'll be right back.
Oh, what am I getting? I'm getting little ads.
Yeah, you can just close them as if they come up.
Oh, right.
There you go. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for your patience. Participants are still entering from the waiting room, so we'll be getting started shortly, but you're at the right place if you're here for the Book Club of California's online program, Glen Dawson, Mountaineer, and Bookman. Thank you. Okay, it's now a couple of minutes after 5 o'clock, so I think we'll get started here. Folks can still enter from the waiting room and they'll join us kind of in progress. So good evening again, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program, Glen Dawson, Mountaineer, and Bookman, presented by Elizabeth Pomeroy. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director of the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and host this webinar. So we have a little over 100 people joining us, or at least registered for the program this evening. So for those of you who are new to us, the Book Club of California is a nonprofit, member and donor supported organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. And oftentimes we do this with a focus on the literature and history of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition books, a scholarly journal, and keepsakes. We also host a year-round series of exhibitions and programs like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, and much, much more. So if you're not a member, or if your membership has lapsed and you're interested in what we do, please consider joining our century-long tradition. Membership dues are modest, but the benefits are many. And we simply cannot do the work that we do without the support of our members. So I encourage you to visit our website at bccbooks.org to join or donate to the Book Club of California. So now for tonight's speaker and our program. Elizabeth Pomeroy is a California native who graduated from Stanford University and holds a PhD in English from UCLA. She served on the staff of the Huntington Library for 10 years and also worked at the W.M. Keck Foundation in Los Angeles. She has taught English at Pasadena City College for a decade and has also taught at UCLA, UC Irvine, and California State University, Los Angeles. Living in Pasadena for the past 35 plus years, she has been active in local organizations, serving as a board member of the Pasadena Historical Society, the Pasadena Sister Cities Committee, the Sierra Club, and other groups. She has served the city of Pasadena as a member of the Recreation and Parks Commission and the Library Commission. She is, of course, a writer. And she has contributed a weekly column on historic places entitled Lost and Found for the Pasadena Star News and the San Gabriel Valley Tribune. In 2000, she established Many Moons Press, which publishes books on Southern California history and nature. She is also the author of the book San Marino, A Centennial History, published by the San Marino Historical Society. Tonight, Elizabeth Pomeroy will be speaking to us about Glen Dawson, Mountaineer and Bookman, her latest book. Glen Dawson is a renowned and beloved 20th century Californian, a globe-trotting mountaineer, and a man of books. Glen Dawson was born 7 years after his father opened Ernest Dawson's antique bookshop in downtown Los Angeles in 1905. Mentored by his father and fueled by his own determination, the young Dawson rose to prominence in two very different spheres. As a partner at Dawson's bookshop for 60 years, he was influential in rare book circles. And as an avid climber and lifelong traveler, he achieved dozens of mountaineering first ascents. Glen was a Sierra Club member for 94 years, served on the board of directors there, and was active in the local club chapter. From his climbs with the Sierra Club to his fame and success with Dawson's Bookshop, his 103-year life was filled with daring and adventure. And in her book, Elizabeth Pomeroy explores the many facets of Dawson's incredible life, including his family, businesses, publications, and support of organizations and institutions. So if you have any questions for our speaker this evening, please use the chat and the Q&A function in Zoom. We should definitely have time at the top of the hour to take questions, and I'll curate those from the Q&A and the chat. Now, I guess it's just my incredible pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Elizabeth Pomeroy, and pass over the controls for tonight's webinar. Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. And greetings, Book Club of California. And a huge thank you to Kevin for his technical skills in getting us established here as we are. So we are here to talk about Glen Dawson, Mountaineer and Bookman, and also to trace the history of the illustrious Dawson's Bookshop of Los Angeles. When Glen died in Pasadena in 2016, a friend advised me to look at a climbers online forum called Super Topo, which was an international community of mountain climbers. And he advised me to look there, and I saw a section headed Glen Dawson leaves us at 103. Only a week or two after the death of Glen, there were already 75 tributes posted there on that website. And these were some of them. He will be remembered with the greatest respect. Another, the passing of a legend. Another one wrote, he is one of the Sierra's immortals. And my favorite, which we put on the back cover of our book, what a legacy. To accomplish half as much would fill a life for most people. Now, these tributes were written even though he had ended his climbing career some 70 years before. So I want to trace what those accomplishments were that yielded these dozens of tributes. Glen's destiny showed up early. He was born 1912 in Los Angeles. Here he is at the age of 4 on the roof of his family's house. He always relished high places and sought high places all through his life. Here he is older, reading a book, perhaps brought home from the bookshop that his father had founded in 1905. The 4 Dawson children, Glen, the eldest, the sisters are Fern and June, and the baby is Mira Dawson in his little frock, 9 years younger than Glen. Later, his sister Fern wrote, even as a child, Glen seemed to have a serious maturity beyond his years. He seemed to feel a personal responsibility for his younger siblings, which continued all through his life. This is 3 generations of Dawson men. On the right is Thomas Dawson, the father of 11 children. His 8 daughters were all named for flowers: rose, lily, violet, pansy. In the center is Ernest Dawson, and to the left, young Glen. Ernest encouraged his son Glen in mountain climbing from an early age. Ernest was a distinguished climber himself. And here he is with his boy at the age of 14. This is Mount Charleston in Nevada. Ernest was president of the Sierra Club, and a number of features in our local mountains are named for him: Dawson Saddle, etc. Here's young Glen. A photograph taken by Ansel Adams up in Tuolumne Meadows. He's wearing his Sierra Club life membership pin. As Kevin said, he was a life member for 94 years in the Sierra Club. This was taken on one of the famous high trips that were excursions in the earliest years of the Sierra Club, where several hundred members would go into the mountain meadows and haunts and linger for several weeks every summer. So there's his photo by Ansel Adams. Now in 1931, Francis Farquhar, distinguished climber and scholar and Peter's dad, invited a philosophy instructor from Harvard to come out to California and teach the techniques of roped climbing to the California climbers. These were alpine methods that ensured the safety of climbing and made peaks that were previously inaccessible now became possible. And after that seminar, or kind of mountain seminar up in the Palisades, they went in search of a challenge. The challenge undertaken was the first ascent of the east face of Mount Whitney. And these are the 4 people who accomplished that first ascent. On the left, Jules Eichhorn, a good friend of Glen and climbing partner. Next to Jules is Norman Clyde, who was a mountain legend in himself. Then Robert Underhill, he had a lot to be proud of. And on the right, young Glen, age 19. This became the signature accomplishment of Glen's mountain climbing career. You'll see a few more photographs of his mountain accomplishments. On the left, the thumb of Mount Hoffman in the Sierra, and the figure in the notch below is Muir Dawson. Muir also did this climbing, this intrepid climbing. On the right, you see Glen rappelling at Stony Point, which is out near Chatsworth. After this seminar undertaken up at the Palisades, Glen accomplished 46 first ascents of mountains, of peaks in the Sierra Nevada, and we put all of the list of 46 first ascents is in the back of the book. Glen went to UCLA, graduated from UCLA, and there he studied history, which he felt was the best preparation for a bookseller. His father had taken him at the age of 16 on a book buying trip to Europe, at which time they climbed the Matterhorn and the Jungfrau. But now he was finishing up at UCLA. One of his history professors wanted him to stay on for a PhD in history. But Glen wrote, "My father offered a trip around the world and I chose that." So in the summer of 1935, Glen traveled by Greyhound bus across the United States, crossed to Europe by sea, and he told his Sierra Club friends, "I'm going to see the world, especially the mountains." He also went to study with two distinguished booksellers of Europe. One was Emil Hirsch in Munich, and the other Leonard Cohen in London. And these were booksellers that his father had come to know very well. So here he is in Germany. He made a number of important climbs and adventures and ski adventures in Germany, but bear in mind, 1935, the clouds of war were already gathering. And this photograph, I think, encapsulates beautifully his experience the first part of this trip. Those mountain peaks would have called him, attracted him like a magnet. But that peaceful village, which is in Germany, quiet winter village, but see the flag that was there. Now, Glen saw Hitler on a number of occasions, and he also saw Mussolini, and he wrote his impressions of these of Europe in the 30s. He wrote a series of letters home, about 1,000 pages, and I read through all those letters, giving his impression of his book selling training, and also this glorious wandering in the mountains, which he was so, which delighted him so much. He went to the Winter Olympics, 1936, at which Hitler was presiding. But you see how peaceful, but that was an ominous peace that he experienced there in Germany. Here he is climbing in Germany. The next stage of his bookselling training was here, 84 Charing Cross Road. The shop is Marx and Co. And Leonard Cohen was his mentor there. You may be aware of a book called 84 Charing Cross Road, which is a collection of letters of a New Yorker who wrote this bookstore. And it also became a play called 84 Charing Cross Road. After serving as an apprentice in this shop for a number of months, and Glen was learning everything about auctions, pricing, sources, and descriptions of antiquarian books. He continued on around the world. After climbing in England and Wales, he crossed Russia by train to China, Japan, more climbing there in the Japanese Alps, and then back home. But it was a year he was away. When he returned, he resumed his friendships with the Sierra Club comrades who had meant so much to him, and he is married Mary Helen Johnston. They were ski and mountaineering partners. They married in 1940 and had in due time, they had 3 children, Pete, Karen, and Mary Susan, known as Susie. Glen became a partner with his father when he returned from the globe. But those clouds of war 1943, Glen joined the army and he was to return to Europe. He joined a famous division of the army called the 10th Mountain Division, also known as Warriors on Skis. And this was a group of soldiers who had experience in winter and skiing fortitude. They were trained in mountain experience to go into the Alps and undertake some special campaigns there, the 10th Mountain Division. What you see here is a group of soldiers. They were led by Glen and several others on a 4-day trek on skis from Malta, the town of Malta, to Aspen, Colorado. This was part of their training in mountain combat. They were known as the Warriors on Skis. The Warriors on Skis went eventually to Naples, to northern Italy, and participated in the liberation of northern Italy at the very close of World War II. So that was a chance for Glen to show his leadership and his skills, his mountaineering skills, suited him perfectly. Dawson's Bookshop. Now we must make our way to the bookshop. This is Ernest Dawson, seated in Dawson's Bookshop at his desk about 1940. Ernest Dawson was an extremely fascinating character in himself, the father of Glen. He was always a seeker for a better social order. He was active in the campaign of Upton Sinclair for governor of California. And he was active in the group called EPIC, End Poverty in California. He attended gatherings of clergy and various progressive groups. As a dedicated Sierra Club climber, he was president also of the Sierra Club. We must look at the origins of Dawson's Bookshop. Ernest had been employed in a bookshop in Los Angeles earlier. He never studied past high school, but the world of books became his university. After he worked for several years at one of the bookstores in the city, he decided to begin his own. He acquired about 2,200 books for a penny each from the Salvation Army. He rented a part of a store on South Broadway. It was 1905. And at that time, he remembered that a customer from his previous job had wanted a certain book on Indian basketry, and he had that book. So he bicycled across the city and sold the man that book at his office for $2.50. And this action, I believe, indicates what became the hallmark of Dawson's Bookshop. A bookshop with these policies can thrive for 100 years. First of all, he remembered the wants and the special interests of that customer. And secondly, he took that extra step to connect the book with the person who wanted it. This is that first bookshop, the interior about 1908. Now, Dawson's Bookshop had 4 downtown locations, each time growing until they went to their final location, which most of us remember, on Larchmont Boulevard. But this was the first one. That's his sister Myrtle is in the center. Here's the staff of Dawson's Bookshop in 1940, the 35th anniversary of the shop. You see Glen at the far left, and Ernest in the center. By that time, there was a considerable staff of people, each of them becoming an expert in a particular area of the stock of Dawson's Bookshop. Now, Ernest Dawson was brilliant at sustaining his enterprise through the Depression, through all of the years that he maintained that shop. Just one example of how he did this, he developed a policy that every staff member, all those people that you saw there, every staff member could go one at a time each year for 2 weeks with pay to study at the Huntington Library. And they all did that. And then when they came back, he reported that they added such zest to the work at the shop and continued their own education. So in this way, Dawson's Bookshop became almost a little academical village in itself, with people continually studying and learning more about the bookselling trade. Ernest Dawson died in 1947, and Glen and his brother Muir became equal partners in the shop. Glen, you see, had studied abroad. He had been in close working relationship with his bookshop really his entire life. Here he is at his father's desk, a photograph of his father above. And here are Glen and Muir. Do you remember them? Did you know them? Here they are in Dawson's Bookshop, approximately in the 50s. By that time, Dawson's was becoming a kind of bibliophile seminar, an intellectual hub. It really developed into a global crossroads for books and for those who write and print and buy and collect books, bringing together bookish people of many different skills. Glen and Muir developed different specialties. Glen was very active with Western Americana and also developed the largest mountaineering collection in the West, sustaining his interest even after he had given up active climbing. Muir was very interested in fine printing. He was devoted to the Ramsden Coffin Club, and also Asian material was a major interest of his. Dawson's Bookshop became a place where if you were in town, if you loved books, or if you were a mountaineer, you would go to Dawson's on Saturday morning because there would be interesting people there and an ever-changing array of fascinating books. Glen and Muir not only had different specialties, but they took different days off. And if one was traveling, the other would be sure to be there. And as Glen put it, if a customer comes into the shop and asks for Mr. Dawson, we could always produce one. It was a partnership that endured for 50 years. But far beyond just buying and selling of books, Dawson's Bookshop produced many wonderful artifacts and contributions to book life, which many of us still cherish and collect to this day. These are the catalogs. Dawson's Bookshop produced 550 of these catalogs. From 1907 to the final one was in the year 2002. 550 catalogs. Here you see a sample. They were thematically based, many of them. They had far more than just the titles and the prices of books. They contain bibliographic information. Several of them were combined into monographs, which are still maintained by libraries as essential reference works. One example is that when Queen Elizabeth II was at the time of her coronation, they produced a special catalog books of the kings and queens of Britain through the centuries. So you can see here what some of their favorite themes were: Asian books, art books, California, and the West. They make wonderful reading. The Huntington Library has all of these catalogs except about a dozen, and I read through every one of them. They were just irresistible. Now, Ernest Dawson advised his two sons not to publish because it would be too distracting, and he felt they should stay focused on the buying and selling, but they did not follow his advice. And it's a good thing for all of us that they did not. I have the checklist of the publications of Dawson's Bookshop, compiled by Doug John and Dennis Kruska, and they have listed 345 publications by Dawson's Bookshop. These included 4 series. What you see on the screen is the early California travel series. Look how beautiful those books are. There are 50 volumes in that series, and that's the cases that belong to Glen. These books, all of the Dawson books, were beautiful works of the book art. They had binding, end papers, photographs or maps were tipped in, all crafted very beautifully. So there are 50 volumes of the early California travel series. Also, there was Baja California Travels series, 50 volumes. Famous California Trials, there were 10 volumes there, and the Los Angeles Miscellany, which is quite humorous and diverse, 17 volumes there. This one is the Malibu, W.W. Robinson, Lawrence Clark Powell. It's illustrated by Irene Robinson. Plantain Press, a fold-out watercolor map, just a thing of beauty, and quite characteristic of Dawson publications. Glen was also very interested in miniature books, and he and Mary Helen were among the founders of the Miniature Book Society. These are 2 examples. The top, the miniatures you see are only about 3 inches in height. The upper one is a set of little tributes to Glen Dawson at the age of 99. And you see him on a pinnacle in his youth, and we put that photograph in the book in quite a large format as well. And the lower one shows an alphabet related to miniature books. And sure enough, the letter D is represented by Glen standing on a similar pinnacle and holding up a tiny miniature book. Dawson published about 92 of these miniature books, which are highly collectible and very delightful. And they too have, as tiny as they are examples of the book arts with fine binding and often the printers, the noted printers of the day helped to produce these books. Now let's look at the bookshop again. Dawson's Bookshop was in downtown Los Angeles for 63 years at 4 different locations. And you see the on the right is the interior of the last downtown bookshop, which was on Figueroa. What you see on the left was the opening day of the final location of Dawson's Bookshop, Larchmont, in the Larchmont neighborhood. Now, the reason for this move, Glen was not enthusiastic about leaving downtown. He did not want to leave. But this was 1968 that they made the final move to Larchmont. And by that time, downtown was being overtaken by skyscrapers, corporate headquarters, freeways, traffic, and the rents were going high. The bookshops were, as I said in the book, they were dispersing like a galaxy expanding outward. It just was not practical to continue to try to have a bookshop there. But Larchmont, which had a village setting, proved to be ideal. And there, Dawson's Bookshop thrived for 42 years. They built their own shop there with this familiar sign. Do you remember this? Were some of you there? I hope you were. That's Muir on the left. Michael Dawson is our friend today. And he is the son of Muir, and there's Glen on the right. Dawson's Bookshop. Here they are in Larchmont. That's Michael on the left, Muir next to him. Next to Muir is Steve Tabor. We know him still. He is on the staff at the Huntington Library. Over to the right, we see Glen, and we see Agnes, who worked in the shop for a long time. She's the wife of Muir, Agnes Dawson. So we leave them there. It was a seamless transition. They were kept on with publishing, they kept on with the catalogs, they kept on with Saturday mornings, and they being a kind of mecca for book-loving people anyone who came through Southern California would go there. Now, Glen, besides his book life, was very active in organizations. He was one of the founders of the Westerners, the Los Angeles Chorale. The Westerners, an organization of historians and just general lovers of Western history. He was a sheriff of the Westerners. And here he is in the view that as they knew him when he first started that chorale. He was also active in the Historical Society of Southern California, the Zamorano Club. He was, as you said, a founder of the Miniature Book Society, the Antiquarian Booksellers Association, the Sierra Club. He was a director of the Sierra Club as well. So he was always putting together groups of people and inspiring them to collect books and to join the life of books, which meant so much to him. Later in his life, Glen gave many of his own books to the Azusa Pacific University, including those globe-trotting letters that I mentioned. And here he is, now it's the year 2009, receiving an honorary degree from Azusa Pacific University, an honorary doctorate. So he did receive his doctorate toward the end of his life. After Mary Helen died, Glen was somewhat at a loss, and his daughter Susie determined that they should go traveling. And they went to, can you guess where this is? It's another of the high places that Glen so much loved. This is Machu Picchu. Glen is 90 years old in this photograph. They went to Machu Picchu because when the children were teenagers, the family had a foreign exchange student from Peru named Rosie. And after Glen was left on his own in the retirement community, Villa Gardens in Pasadena, Mary Helen was gone. They went to Peru to see Rosie. And I sent to Rosie a copy of this book, and she returned to me a most gracious note of thanks and remembering her American papa and how much she had cherished him. In the book, there are other examples of how Glen was seeking high places. You remember him from the roof of his childhood home. And now we'll see the last photograph of which really pulls together all these components of Glen's life. Here he is at Villa Gardens retirement community. He's 93 years old. This is a photograph that was in the obituary in the Los Angeles Times. And he is showing the artifacts of his long life. So if we look closely, you can see the photograph by Ansel Adams. You see a biography of Norman Clyde is there. You see several publications of Dawson's Bookshop. The white book on the left is the Dawson 80, which is a collection of an annotated list of the essential books for Southern California history, published as a tribute to Glen, the Dawson 80. And you see copies of the Sierra Echo, which is a mountaineering newsletter of the Sierra Club. So there you see his book life and his mountaineering life spread out before him, and Glen as vivacious and proud as he always was to the end of his life. People came to visit him, and mountaineers came to visit him and hear his stories. So that concludes really the long, let's go back to Glen. Let's go back to Glen here. The long and eventful life of Glen. There's much more that we could tell, but this, I think, gives you a sense of the range of his activities. The legacy of Glen. He believed that he would be best known for that first ascent of the east face of Mount Whitney. And sure enough, in the obituary in the Los Angeles Times was almost entirely devoted to that accomplishment, the first ascent of the east face of Mount Whitney. He participated in the far-reaching renaissance of Los Angeles book selling and the birth of modern mountain climbing. He helped to build many academic research and personal libraries. That's to a large extent his legacy. The libraries that you and I like to consult have been enriched by the work of Glen. Also, Dawson's Bookshop for years stood out as an academical village, a place of study and conversation, and the publication of hundreds of books, all part of his legacy. The shop achieved 105 years, carried on by Michael Dawson, before finally closing in 2010. But if you go online or if you go to the antiquarian book fairs, which I hope we will all go to again soon, you will find Dawson's Bookshop and you'll find Michael was there. In his century of life, Glen brought a quiet but dauntless energy to all of these endeavors. And I believe his accomplishments were amplified because he inspired so many other people to give their best also. He liked to start things and inspire people to keep them going. That was part of his legacy. Glen was always a historian, and now his legacy is a firm part of California history. So thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Wow, that was really incredible. That was so terrific. What kind of an interesting and remarkable man with such a curious history. And I love that you ended it talking about his legacy and the fact that the paper, talked about the first ascent, which is of course huge, right? That is a huge accomplishment. But I love that, his real legacy is that he was an inspiration, right? And he helped build people's personal libraries as collecting and as a bookseller, and wow, just so incredible. And I have to admit, I think we talked about this. I'm a Sierra Club member as well, right?
Oh,
But
that's good.
clearly not as long as 94 years being a Sierra Club member. And being a Sierra Club member, I knew of Glen Dawson, but I didn't know all of his life and his accomplishments and his contributions. So much. And we do have some questions that are in the Q&A and that people sent to me in the chat. You've answered a couple of them, but maybe you want to say a little bit more, or maybe the person missed when you addressed the question, so we can revisit it. So the first question has to do with like all of these incredible photographs and images that are in the book. They're first of all, they're beautiful. The stuff that the old photos are great because they're like moments in time, capturing his youth and his interests, and then later in life, look at the joy in his face there in that picture on the screen. It's just so incredible. So where did you get all these photos, and what was your research process like to pull the book together?
Oh, I want to tell you about that, but can I hold this up?
Sure.
So this is showing us that here's the photograph that you're looking at. And this is showing us that the headline on the obituary is Pioneering Sierra Mountaineer. Not the book life, but the mountaineering life. Isn't that interesting? So this is where the photographs came from. They came from far and wide. But the mountaineering and anything related to the Sierra Club came from the archives of the Sierra Club Angeles chapter.
Nice. Okay.
And the executor of the Dawson collection in those archives is Bob Cates. And he also provided many of those bookshop photographs because it's the Dawson papers and Dawson photographs that he has.
Yeah. And what was the research process like? Like, how long did you work on the book to pull all of this together?
Well, I first got interested in the topic at the 100th birthday celebration of Glen, which was held here in Pasadena. And people said, you'll have to write about him. Right. So I would say 3 or 4 years of gathering, the hunting and gathering age.
Right.
And much of the research was done at the Huntington. Also, the Dawson's Bookshop papers are at UCLA in special collections. They are there. Also, Honnold Library, the Clark Library had some material.
And did you say that his collection, some of the catalogs from the bookshop are at the Huntington, but some of his collection of books are at Azusa Pacific? Is that what
Yes, the catalogs I read at the Huntington, and they're all there except about a dozen.
Okay.
But other people have them. I think Bob Bottomley, has a complete set of the catalogs, and some collectors do have them.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because in the miniature book for D for Dawson, there's a line in there that says collecting Dawson Bookshop books, 92 collectors there are, or something like that. And
Yes,
I bet there's
exactly.
more, many more now, because those are just so delightful,
Yes.
those catalogs.
You know,
Um,
another thing that I want to mention, that which I meant to include, when Robert Underhill came out to California and launched this whole golden age of mountaineering, it was Francis Farquhar, Peter's dad, who invited Robert Underhill to come. So he too was at the starting point of the
mm,
pioneering age of mountaineering.
right.
Francis Farquhar.
Yeah, another big name in the mountain climbing and the Sierra Club world. Um,
Yes.
so we have some specific questions. One, is there a story behind Glen's book plate that is featured on the cover of the book?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there what?
Is there a story, like where?
You know, there's been people have been trying to help me determine who drew that design, because
Oh, yeah, it's so interesting. It, it's a
very,
great image for the cover.
isn't it? Didn't
Yeah,
that turn out well?
yeah,
But we don't know who the artist is. But it's clearly, you know, a mountaineer's uh, book plate. So you have
right.
the book and the mountain life combined there in that image.
Mhm. There's a question about his interest in Baja California, and do you know where that came from? Uh,
Oh, yes.
yeah, and was he personally involved in the travel series? Like, what was his direct role there?
Yes. In fact, as far just to back up for the book plate, if
Oh
anyone
yeah,
listening knows who the artist might be, then maybe some of the experts who are listening could help us and fill that in.
yeah,
Baja California, the Baja series of 50 volumes was the general editors for the entire set, Glen Dawson and Ed Carpenter, our wonderful friend Ed Carpenter. So the two of them were the ones who sought out all of that material for the Baja series.
mm,
There was also, Glenn also got busy with the Baja California Symposiums, which were conducted every year for
mm.
dozens of years, alternating between Baja and Northern California in the venue.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
guess he was a Westerner. He loved
Yeah,
the development of the West, and for uh, Baja California was part of California in a larger sense. And
yeah.
so once he got launched, it was easy to see that there was history, botany, anthropology. The series talks about languages, it talks about the indigenous people,
Hmm.
very diverse. And he just loved all of that and plunged into it.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. So interesting that he was a man of the earth, right? And the travels and the world.
Right.
So there's a great comment in the chat, which is something I wrote down for myself, because I love the idea that he turned down pursuing a PhD to travel the world, and how he recognized like the value of world travel, and it was just as good, if maybe even better, than getting an academic degree. So that's a great story. And was that an easy story to uncover? Where did you find that story?
Oh, let's see, that particular story. Oh, well, that's probably in these globe-trotting letters of the
Oh,
1,000 pages that I
oh
mentioned
yeah,
to you. And
yeah.
at one point, he said that while he was in the midst of this journey, he said, "I see now that being in libraries is not as exciting as buying and selling and finding books. That's the
Mm.
real excitement." And so he felt that he had made a good choice, instead of being, as some of us have been, including me, uh, you know, um, serious bookworms and hours in libraries. No, he would rather be out in the trade, finding the books, selling them, and getting exchanging books with people, and it was more active. That's what he liked.
Right. Right. And I was going to say, so you mentioned that the letters, the 1,000 pages of letters. What did he do? Other writings? Like, did he have? Was he a creative writer, like short stories or poetry, or more travel logs, or?
Uh, not so much. Although he
Uh-huh.
wrote articles, a lot of articles in the in various newsletters. Oja Volante, that
Right.
at the Zamorano Club, there are a number of articles that he wrote that were there. He wrote memoirs. When he got to Villa Gardens in retirement, he and I think this happens in many retirement communities. He started writing his memories. He wrote them for his family, and some of them were deposited in the family papers, and so that's where I found some of the material.
So there's some specific questions, which I don't know if you're going to know the answers to them, but David Brower, who was another Sierra Club icon, was David Brower a member of the Warriors on Skis?
Yes, he certainly was. David Brower was born the same year as Glen. They were exact contemporaries. David Brower was in the, it's also called the Winter Army. There's a new book about the 10th Mountain Division called the Winter Army. David Brower was part of it, and he wrote one of the manuals of techniques for the ski mountaineers. So he was there, and Glen knew him.
Right. So
and knew him in the Sierra Club too.
Yeah. So was Glen responsible for getting Muir involved with the family book selling business? Like, how did that happen? Was Glen responsible for bringing Muir into the family book selling business, or how did, do you know how Muir got in there?
Possibly, but I think Ernest Dawson was
really was.
Ernest Dawson brought, conveyed to both of his sons, but not so much to the daughters, actually, but to both of his sons, that this was a field of endeavor, and just encouraged them. And Muir was also in the war, and when he returned, he came back to finish his college work at Pomona College, and then right away joined Glen. And they both had been down in the basement of the earliest Dawson's Bookshop, opening the crates of books and getting excited about the new books that had come in. And so he was really in the swim from his childhood.
Do you know, there's another question about, I guess, the family. Where did the Dawson family arrive first on the West Coast, and where were they from, and kind of more of their history?
Oh, Thomas Dawson, the father of 11 children, was English. And so, and Glen, one of the catalogs was at the time of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth, present Queen. There was a catalog focused on kings and queens of England for years, and there was a little family memoir was in that catalog, saying that Thomas Dawson had come from England, and the family had always been in close familiar felt a familiar bond with England, and so there was that sense of English heritage.
Nice.
Coming down through the family.
So there was also a bit more about family. Was you said he was married, he had a wife, he had 3 kids, but it's hard to imagine he really had time for a family, right? Given he went up to the war, he had the shop, he had his climbing, he had all of his pursuits. Like, what was his family? Was there a really tight family connection there? Did you read a lot about his family stuff?
Yes, I love these questions because I can tell you 2 stories about him as a father.
Great.
The first one was that he was a Boy Scout leader and active in Scouts with his son Keith for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And a typical Glen project, he got his scouts to, he assigned each scout a different topic in the history of the area where they lived, which is San Rafael Hills of Pasadena. And each of them was to research. One was studying birds of the area, one was studying Indians, another geology. And Keith and the boys produced these small essays. And then Glen taught them how to compile the essays and publish them into a little booklet, which I saw in the Pasadena Historical Society. So that was just the way that he brought his knowledge and skills into the lives of those young boys.
Right.
And the second story I want to tell you, yes, he did take his children to the mountains and also some nieces and nephews. And one of them wrote that about an experience of being with Uncle Glen, who took them along the edge of a glacier somewhere in the Sierra, and wrote that, I think this perhaps was one of his daughters who wrote this, that the glacier looked like enormous ice teeth, but with Uncle Glen, we felt perfectly safe.
Aw. So it sounds like he was a great family man. Lots of connections with youth. Yeah, that's terrific. There's a question about did Glen have any comments that you know about Machu Picchu? Like why particularly was that one of his high places that he loved?
You know, I don't think of anything in particular, except just that we can be sure that he, by the expression on his face and how much that he loved it, and he loved being with Rosie, his daughter, so many years. But I don't know that he wrote anything about it.
Okay, great. So there's one last comment, which comes into a question, which is, the comment is, wonderful book, somebody wrote, beautifully written and exquisitely presented. What is your next project?
You know, I have to say, and I've been talking about this with Peter Farquhar, at this time, the libraries and the archives are all closed. I can't go there. I can't go to the Huntington Library, which would be my haunt. So I have ideas, but I don't have anything really actively pursuing right at this moment. But I need another project, and I will be embarking soon. I just don't know what it will be yet.
So we'll be on pins and needles waiting for the next idea to come to life. Maybe you should show your last slide so people can see about the book, because we're a little past the top of the hour, and I think I've gotten to most of the questions. Other questions here, you've answered a lot of them. Miniature Book Society, Westerners, ABAA, all things he was involved with and or founded. More about where his collection went, which were some of the questions. Are there modern day examples of people like Glen Dawson, incredible booksellers with these, super interests in something that is not bookish, right? Like mountaineering is very different than bookish. And is there other figures like this that, you came across in researching Glen that we should know about?
In the book world in particular?
Yeah, well, I think they're just saying, I'm not sure if they're saying book world exactly, but are there examples of other people like Glen Dawson that we should know about? Because he is so remarkable and so interesting when the dichotomy of his interests and stuff.
Oh, that's a wonderful
big question.
That's a wonderful question. And probably some of the people in the Book Club of California have the range and the of interest and are creating books as well as sharing and enjoying books. I'll probably think of someone, Kevin, as soon as meeting.
Well, you can follow up with me and let me know if you can think of someone as accomplished or will be as remarkable and remembered in a way that Glen Dawson was. That would be It'd be
I
interesting
do.
to
I
know.
do want to give a shout out to the producers of this book. That
Oh,
would
great.
be Charlie and Doreen Allen. They have produced a number of books for the Huntington Library, and they uh, are skilled in the kind of printing that book lovers and lovers of the book art will really cherish.
Mm.
The reason those photographs look so wonderful is Howard Morris. I want to say his name. And he took photographs that were, some of them were old, but he made them look sharp and
Pristine,
strong.
sharp, and yeah.
So a lot of skill went into the producing this book.
Yeah.
And
So
I
there,
acknowledge
so
them.
on your screen, there's information about how to buy the book if you're interested. I also put it in the chat. So if you want to copy and paste it out of the chat or click one of the links in the chat, you can do that. It will also be in the email that will go out tomorrow, thanking everybody for attending. And even for those who didn't attend, we'll get a similar email that tells them how they can find out more about Glen Dawson and buy the book if they're interested. So here's where I get to thank you, Elizabeth, for such a great experience working with you on getting your presentation to the book club audience, and for such a terrific presentation. I loved it. I was riveted, and sometimes I can, as I told you earlier, I can easily be distracted, but I was hanging on every word, and I love the images and the photos that you shared with us. So thank you,
Good. Oh,
thank you
good.
so much.
And I hope all of you in this book club will enjoy this book as well.
So again, thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth. You were terrific. And I just want to thank everyone for attending this Book Club of California program tonight. I hope that you'll join us for our next online program, which is H.G. Wells and Frederick Gowdy, California Dreamin'. And that's going to be on Monday, November 16th, a week from tonight, here on Zoom from 5 to 6:15 p.m. This is going to be another live online presentation by author, artist, designer, and illustrator Rex Parker. You can register for this event online at bccbooks.org/programs or using the link in the weekly programs emails that you may be receiving from the book club. And if you're not receiving those emails, you can send me an email and I'll show you how to get signed up for them, or you can sign up on the book club's website. You can contact me at kevin@bccbooks.org if you'd like to. So again, thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Be well and take care of one another. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye now.